Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I have my script here. It's on cardboard for convenience with Zoom. Now I get to try it out in person. Welcome to our service from the Unitarian Universalist Meeting House in Springfield, Vermont. My name is Dick Andrews. I am one of the trustees. We welcome those of you here in the meeting house, as well as those of you surfing the electrons of Zoom. We're a multifaceted community, as I expect all of you know, and we're glad you're with us this morning. We are a covenantal community in which we have promised to care for each other and to learn from each other. Together, we seek to deepen and broaden our faith and understanding. Joining us today will enrich our covenant and community, so we thank you. If you're a guest, we invite you to simply enjoy being with us. At the end of the service, there will be time for announcements and then an opportunity for guests to introduce themselves if they wish. Everyone is welcome to join us after the service for our coffee hour and discussion time, either in person or online, and we certainly hope you do. So thank you again for joining us.
I'll say good morning too.
Good morning.
Good morning. I am so pleased and proud to introduce my friend, Anne Darling from East Hampton, Massachusetts. Anne and I have known each other for almost 40 years, I think. Yeah, okay. We've been singing for about that long, and with the Blanche Louise Chorale pretty much for that long. And Anne has been a visitor here at the church in person before COVID a few times, a couple of times. And then since COVID, pretty much regularly. She decided that she liked coming to the Zoom services and came and then joined several discussions, book discussions, and the 1619 project discussions. And then I think you joined the Friends on the Path group. No, okay. I thought you had. And then recently joined with the Art Adventures group, in which we have lots of fun. And we had lots of discussions also. And more recently, she became a choir member. Really we're very happy with that. And now here today, she's with us to present a service for us. And how great is that? And it's on her journey to through anti-nuclear activism. And so I think that's all, well, it's not all I wanted to say, but I think it's enough for now. So there you go. Thank you so much.
You like Dee?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Those of you who don't know,
our Tina has a very special birthday coming up this week.
Oh,
So wish her happy birthday.
yes.
She's 5.5 months younger than me.
Yes, we did.
7-0. Yeah, 7-0. So, good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody up there. I'm really happy to be here in the sanctuary. It's such a beautiful place, and I love it here. So back a few months ago, I mentioned something about anti-nuclear activism, and some people seemed interested in hearing more about it. So I'm always ready to talk about it. And I appreciate the support of the Worship and Arts Committee in making this happen. Robin Ruffner last week talked about showing up so God can show out. And so consider this a follow-on from the amazing Robin Ruffner. For opening words today, I've got 2 short readings. One is from Dorothy Day, the Catholic Workers Movement. People say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There is too much work to do. The second reading is from Adrienne Rich, an American poet, essayist, and feminist. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. So when the subject of nuclear power comes up in this neck of the woods, it's only right that we give a tip of the hat to the town that most of us are in, Springfield, Vermont, which was declared the official hometown of the Simpsons in 2007. Those of you who know Homer Simpson well will remember that he worked in a nuclear power plant and was prone to making some pretty dumb and terrifying mistakes. The Vermont Yankee nuclear power facility, about 45 miles south of Springfield on the Connecticut River, is the real deal. No joke. Vermont Yankee was run much better than Homer's facility, and I am grateful to the operators for the lack of major accidents. And not that there weren't any problems, but there were no major accidents. And just want to take note of my no nukes. And on the back.
Can you move? Yeah, just move. Oh, there you go. On Yankee closing.
My Yankee closing crew. I was on the closing crew, my Yankee. That's a transformer fire they had. Fortunately, no one was injured. So. Vermont Yankee is where most of my anti-nuclear activism is focused. I lived really close to it for the great majority of its operating life. Many groups work about 35 years. Many groups work to pressure the owners of Vermont Yankee, the state and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, to shut down Vermont Yankee at the end of its 40-year operating license in March 2012. After some persistent urging from a friend, this was my daily carpool buddy, so she was pushing. And because I felt a responsibility to my son to actively make his world a safer place, I affiliated myself with the Safe and Green campaign. Safe and Green was made up of people who lived within the Vermont Yankee evacuation zone, the ones who would lose the most if something went wrong. And we were all supposed to go up to the Bellows Falls High School when the sirens went off. So that because we lived so close, it gave our voices authenticity and our hearts urgency. 2 folks that you know well were in my affinity group, and we spent lots of time together back then, Steve and Laurel. They're in the pictures up there. We're standing out in front of Vermont Yankee in those pictures. They're camping in the Northeast Kingdom today, or they would be here. I'm not going to go into lots of war stories. I'm going to say that I have no doubt that our letters, demonstrations, vigils, advocacy with the state, and vocal participation in federal regulatory hearings were part of shutting Vermont Yankee down in 2014. Almost 3 years after the initial license ended, and 17 years before the end of the extended license that had been granted by the NRC. That and the cheap cost of natural gas. That ended up shutting down Vermont Yankee. It's now decommissioning, which is a very complicated process, both chemically and radiologically. I continue to be involved in watchdogging this decommissioning and in advocacy for responsible handling of radioactive waste. I am part of a group called Citizens Awareness Network. These are my buddies, CAN. All of the core organizers in CAN also have direct experience of living near a nuclear power plant. We have close ties to the communities that are near current and proposed radioactive waste sites as well. We feel that it's a matter of conscience to care about what happens with waste created to generate electricity for our communities. To me, nuclear power has always seemed like the prime example of human hubris and disrespect for life and our Earth. To take something so toxic and so dangerous and use it to meet our greedy demand for energy because we could, and quite possibly to make us feel less guilty about using atomic bombs on other human beings. Think Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace and the government-generated myth that it would produce electricity too cheap to meter, when in fact it is the most expensive way to produce electricity. There is some distance between I'm against nuclear power and I am an anti-nuclear pro-clean energy activist. How does that happen? What makes people become devoted to a cause and dedicate their time and speak their truth to power? So today I'm going to talk about nuclear power. This isn't a tutorial on nuclear power per se. It's more about the things about nuclear power that made me an activist and the insights I've gained about activism in general in the process, including its spiritual underpinnings. As we say in our affirmation, service is our prayer. Activism done with a spirit connection to the earth is prayer. I in no way hold myself up as this super activist. I've never even been arrested, but I sure have done a lot of demonstrations, written a lot of letters to the editor. Some of them are out on the table in the foyer. I hope that the insights I've gained from my experience may speak to you. I hope that those of you who have been activists will share your own insights, and that those who are considering trying out this kind of service will ask questions. What moved me to activists revolves around three things: health, justice, and the climate emergency. So if you recall Seth Frisbee talking about the work that he and his wife did, this is very similar. It just echoes with a different topic. So starting with health. Nuclear power and nuclear weapons give off ionizing radiation, which can be incredibly harmful to all living things. In humans, it causes cancer, mutations, birth defects, learning disabilities. It can change one element into another, often with hazardous effects. You're bombarding cells with this stuff that's trying to break the cells apart. It's not a good idea for us. Radiation is emitted and radioactive waste is created at every step of the nuclear cycle, from extraction of the uranium, which is also chemically quite harmful to people, milling and refining the uranium and making it into fuel, using it to make electricity, and then managing its toxic waste. So everywhere along there. Radioactivity from nuclear power plants and nuclear weapons is spread all over our planet. We are all being exposed to it every second of every day. It's not just the big doses from the major accidents like Chernobyl and Fukushima, or weapons tests on Julian's former home, the Marshall Islands. Radiation is also being put into the environment as a matter of routine operation and from leaking radioactive waste. Like carbon, it's invisible and it's lethal. It does a slow violence with its impact usually not China for decades or into the next generations. You will hear talk of acceptable doses of radiation. Well, come to find out that the metrics for what's acceptable were developed quite a while back using an adult male as a standard. What happens if we take an adult male and we bombard him with this or that? But we know that females, people who are pregnant, fetuses, and children are all much more susceptible to damage from radiation than adult males. Nor do these acceptable doses take into account damage from concurrent or past exposures to both radiological and non-radiological toxins. So there's a lot of stuff coming at us in the environment all the time. And these standards of, oh, this is an acceptable level of exposure to radiation, don't take that into account. Don't take damage already done into account. So let's keep it simple here. Dr. Helen Caldicott says there is no safe dose of radiation, and we are not being adequately protected from it by the industry or the government regulators. Right now, for instance, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, has agreed to plans for the nuclear power plants at Indian Point, New York, and Plymouth, Mass, to dump radioactive water into the Hudson River and Cape Cod Bay. It's a battle over what's defined as safe, what jurisdiction states have over their waterways when the NRC has sole jurisdiction over radiological safety, and what role the EPA can play versus the NRC. And then there are the residents who are in an uproar and doing all sorts of organizing against this dumping. The voices of people affected by real radioactive contamination should always be front and center to keep us grounded, to keep us real. It's kind of one of my major principles of activism. It's not an abstract exercise. It is about real lives and the natural habitats and communities that we need to survive. In that light, I have activist friends I want to tell you about who they live near the first commercial reactor in the US. This is not a military reactor, a research reactor. It's the first one that made electricity. It's Yankee Atomic in Rowe, Massachusetts, which is actually just south of the Vermont border on the Deerfield River. Deerfield is a lovely rural tributary of the Connecticut River and a popular place for kayaking, swimming, tubing, rafting, just generally enjoying this beautiful, beautiful place. Yankee Atomic dumped irradiated water into the Deerfield River for 30 years and never let local people know that that's what they were doing. A friend of mine who lived near Yankee Row has a daughter who got ovarian cancer at the age of 16. Another friend talks of spikes in Down syndrome and cancer deaths and the empty seats at the tables around her community. And I want to say that this is a representative incident. It is not an isolated one. This happens often everywhere. So the second, I know this is a very happy topic. We're going to get there. We're going to get to the flip side. The second thing, justice. Tina will tell you that I have a very strong sense of justice. She's laughing. I get upset about things. The more I've learned about nuclear power, the more I've become committed into my anti-nuclear work. I have seen two fundamental dynamics unfold in front of me that really get my justice juices flowing. First is the anti-democratic nature of nuclear power, which is under the sole jurisdiction, as I said, of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It's what I would call a captured regulator. It's better than nothing, absolutely. But it places industry profitability over safety. It doesn't really give a crap about concerns expressed by surrounding communities about safety and transparency. And which, along with the nuclear industry, lies and obfuscates over and over. The public has become the enemy. I say this from long personal experience and the experience of my fellow activists. The NRC and the deep-pocketed industry find willing partners among our national and state legislators. Just as one little but very shining example, there is a bill in Congress right now that would exclude radiation from what can legally be considered pollution, which would do an end run on the EPA at the very least. The second part of justice that gets me going is the injustice of who suffers the most from nuclear power and the sacrifice of entire communities through radioactive and chemical contaminations. Contaminated communities, I will call them sacrifice zones, are largely indigenous, Black, Latino, rural, and or poor, like the activists in these pictures. Stop Canyon Mine is on the rim of the Grand Canyon, and it is threatening to contaminate the sole water source of the Havasupai tribe. You're not going to find a waste site, a nuclear waste site in Montgomery County, Maryland, for instance, which is right outside of DC and one of the wealthiest communities in the country. Much of the waste from Yankee Atomic and Roe went to Barnwell, South Carolina, a working class community that's about 50% Black. It is leaking radioactive water into the sole source aquifer underneath. Uranium is found worldwide in mostly indigenous communities, so in Australia and Africa and the Southwest United States. And the workers and water and air are poisoned with the associated chemicals and radiation from extraction. The Navajo Nation, which is in the Southwest, has over 500 abandoned uranium mines, huge areas contaminated by the tailings from milling operations, and high rates of cancer. Again, these are not isolated examples. And then the climate emergency. When it comes to climate change, it is a greenwashed lie that nuclear power is carbon-free and therefore a good bridge fuel to more reliance on solar and wind and other more sustainable sources of energy. At the point when power is generated in a nuclear power facility, very little carbon is released. That is true. But focusing on this one part of the entire nuclear fuel chain, divorced from the rest of it, commits a common and dangerous thought sin, to coin a phrase. For any form of energy, be it solar, coal, or nuclear, or wind, whatever it is, to really understand its environmental impact, we have to talk about the extraction, the refining, manufacturing the components, energy production, and waste management, the whole thing. When we do this, we see that nuclear is actually a net carbon emitter. It is less than coal and gas, quite a bit more than solar and wind. It's being promoted as a false solution to climate change, and it is diverting billions and billions of dollars, our tax dollars, away from developing less impactful forms of energy and bringing them to scale. How many of you knew that in the Inflation Reduction Act, which was promoted as a climate goal, there was almost as much money in cash bailouts, subsidies, and tax breaks for nuclear power as there was for cleaner and more sustainable forms of energy. And there was also a lot of subsidy for coal and gas in there as well.
For what?
Coal and gas. So now you know exactly how I feel about nuclear power and why. I'm angry. I'm outraged. I am terrified of radiation leaks. Yep. But the lack of power that people all over the world have to consent or not consent to the fuel chain of nuclear power and nuclear waste and weapons also terrifies me. I grieve for the communities that have been poisoned and for the spiritual bankruptcy that allows this to go on. So this is a David and Goliath situation. Activists as David and industry and its government allies as Goliath. I don't actually think that this nation is going to stop using nuclear power or stop pursuing small modular reactors or fusion, which are pipe dreams, and sucking away a lot of money. I'm just going to keep using my human right to speak up and show up and do what I can with a lot of other folks to make the industry and the government do nuclear safer and more democratically and more justly, if you will. I do have faith that our concerted actions will make a difference, even though I don't know what that difference may be. So I guess that's what you would call hope. As Dorothy Day said, no one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There's too much work to do.
Please join me in doing the affirmation. Love is what the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve the needs of all beings, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we grow with each other and the source of our being. I do know this. And now we will have the offering for the ongoing work of this church and for the ongoing work of the family center.
So we'll do a little pivot here, just talk about activism. Getting from wanting something different to doing what we can to make that happen. Dictionary defines activist as a person who believes strongly in political or social change and takes parts in activities such as public protests or with an activist organization to try to make that happen. Here's another definition: someone who speaks their truth to power, even when their voice shakes. And here's another: someone who has a vision of a better world and works with others to move toward that vision. Note that this encompasses both what we would call progressive activism as well as conservative. There is plenty of all of those going around these days. Are there, I'm going to ask you to, if you have other synonyms that you think of, pejorative or more positive. Sometimes people like me get called fearmongers, for instance.
What?
Yeah.
Covers it.
Hmm?
I think you covered it.
Warrior, crusader, champion, whatever, protester. Anti, not for anything, just anti. Since we're in church, let's talk about the spiritual side of activism. This year, we've talked about creating Earth community, and we've seen from many angles this year the harms that we perpetrate on others and the Earth are a result of our disconnection from each other and the sacred web of life. So we have this greedy, human-centric worldview that sees the Earth as a resource for us to use and not as our magnificent mother to cherish, honor, and respect. Being an activist can feel very lonely sometimes, daunting, pushing against a very big tide. Could be nuclear, could be fossil fuels, gas pipelines, whatever it is, whatever thing you're fighting for or against. So as you can tell, I'm very passionate about nuclear power. Find what you're passionate about. Know what you're good at. I can write letters really well. I can sing, so my affinity group was the vocal cords, and we were responsible for all the singing at demonstrations. Contribute to a larger whole. Don't think you have to do it by yourself. Join with other people. That's what makes you powerful and effective. So I know there's folks here and on Zoom who've been activists in various ways. And I'm curious about what are some of the things that have moved you to act, some of the principles that you follow or insights that you developed. What would you say to someone who was hesitant but was thinking maybe getting more active? And this is just to prime the pump, if you will. I've said before, listen to the people who have experienced harm and who are the most at risk, and put their voices out front. And I do have a prime directive for those Trekkies out there. I knew you'd like that. Listen to the earth. It is speaking really loudly to us with supreme intelligence. And one of the best ways to do that is listening to the wisdom of our native elders.
When was the Planet Road built?
The Planet Road was built, I would say, yeah, it was in the 50s. And I'll tell you why I know that, because my dad took us over there to see it when it was brand new, and I was like 5 years old.
Well, when I'm in the 60s, I got married in the 60s and I had a couple of children. In 1963, I was pregnant with my second son. And it was the springtime, and we were part of Perkinsville, Weathersfield. We were trying to be good citizens, and they apparently was a big scare about radioactivity, and then we went to a class. We got together and went over to the Woodstock High School, and somebody had hidden some radioactive things around the school, and we had little calculator, little machines that would tell us how many Geiger counters that would tell us when we came near the radioactive stuff. And at the time, we just did it once a couple of 3 times and got together and talked about what we were going to do if there was a nuclear war or something, or if the reactor blew up or something. And somebody said to me, you know, if you're pregnant, you really ought to, maybe you ought to, you know, there might be some result of this. And I'm realizing my son was born in July, and this was in May, in the spring. So ever after that, I have wondered, you think I was stupid to do that? Because when my son was 17 years old, he failed to mature, and we went to the doctor and found out he had a adenoma, pituitary adenoma, and that was why he wasn't growing up and his voice wasn't changing and all that. So we went to Montreal, and he had an operation, and the tumor or whatever it was, which was benign, by the way, was taken off and taken out, and he ever since took medications, prednisone, testosterone, and all those other things that are huge. Now, you think those times that we used the Geiger counter and were exposed to radiation, do you think that had something to do with why my Alex had a adenoma on his pituitary? Maybe.
Maybe, and I'm sorry Becky was saying that she has a son who developed an adenoma when he was quite young. I'm sorry you carried that worry and that wonder around for so long. Yeah, probably not, but And the thing is, as I said, there's so many things and we keep adding more things to our environment that are harmful to our health, not just radioactivity. So it's really hard to know. Possibly. Sharon?
So what I've been more involved in is activism. There's the anti and the pro side of it is our food. So anti putting poisons on the food we grow and then selling it to people to eat. Genetically engineering the food without really understanding the consequences. You know, and other things that they've done with food that are really not healthy. And so the other side of it is, of course, I've worked in food co-ops and ran a produce department where we work with local farmers growing organically. And, you know, there's a lot more detail on that, but that kind of, focus on our food. I keep thinking that the big corporate huge farms that have just been putting chemicals on, the soil is dead. And I keep thinking sometime that's going to fail to grow food. It's just dead soil. And, you know, I keep being surprised when they're still able to grow, but of course there's climate change affecting it and so on. So buying from local farmers who grow responsibly is an activist stance. So
Our choices really do make a difference. And here you are up against this big agribusiness model that we have. So what keeps you going? You know, this has been a thing you've done for a while. So what keeps you going, even though they're really big and you're maybe, you know.
well, one example is that I've been able to build up my the amount of garlic that I grow in my own home garden. And I pretty much grow enough for ourselves, and I sell a little bit to people who want to start growing their own at a reasonable price and help them get going. And that's an example of something I do with my hands in the dirt and empower other people. So more like that, yeah. And even here in this congregation, we've had a produce share. We didn't last year, but we plan to do it again this year, where local folks who have abundant gardens, like Becky and me and my neighbors who don't come here, but who have extra. And so we'll come, we haven't decided what day of the week, but we'll figure that out when crops start coming in, and we share. It's a produce share. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to contribute. You can just come and participate in the bounty, local bounty. Yeah.
And I come and help her. I don't grow anything anymore, but I come and help her and sit here and
We have a great time.
yeah, we have a great time and talk and yeah.
You whichever.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite 501c that support your anti-nuke,
The what?
that support your anti-nuke stance?
Well, yeah, my organization is 501c3, a nonprofit, private nonprofit,
So it's
Citizens Awareness Network. Yeah, we are we're kind of a New England regional group, but we're part of national networks. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
But also, well, I'll put up on the screen a little bit later, a couple of organizations that are national, the Beyond Nuclear and the Nuclear Information and Resource Service. Those are excellent organizations.
I had a question about that. I know emails, I get a lot of emails of people asking for my opinion on things and of course, donating money and on all kinds of different on all kinds of important different issues. And I was wondering how effective, does anybody know how effective those answers can be if you fill out those forms for different things? Does it really help?
Good question.
Good question, Tony. You know, to me, a lot of those seem like, they're just, they're really asking you those questions, so you'll give them money at the end.
Yes,
And I get
yes,
really mad at them.
yes, me too.
Yeah, I think it depends on the organization, doesn't it? You know, who is it? What do they do? What's gonna happen with the information?
Yeah.
Hard to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hallie?
Yeah, are we having more discussion, or is this the shared experiences and wait a minute, we're not even what you can do, is that what we're doing now?
Yeah, I guess, yes. I don't know what I don't know what it
It's not
says.
The song to be remembered. Can the people on Zoom hear us if we're just talking from our seats?
Yep.
Yes, okay. Just another example of working for rather than against. Years ago, when they were getting the burn plant for trash going over in Claremont, there was a lot of activism against that plant, and I decided, well, if we don't want trash to go to that plant, we have to have a place for all this trash to go. So I decided to work on recycling, and that's how I got involved in that movement, because until we have an alternate place to put this stuff, you know, whether it goes to a landfill or burn plant, it's no good. And and that was the late 80s, and we're still we'll be working on that one forever. Just like small farms are the only sustainable way to go with agriculture, the only way. And will we humans ever grow up enough to get rid of the greed factor and, you know, live sustainably? We'll see.
This is so important, Hallie. It's not just what you're against, it's what you're for.
Yeah,
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, and for me and my husband, we have been recycling and forever, for a long time. And I am so happy that we do that. And, you know, Hallie can attest to the fact that we go there a lot.
yep.
We see her there all the time, or she sees Bill.
Right.
I don't go as much as I used to, but I used to.
When we put things in the trash, it's better than throwing it out the window for the most part.
Absolutely.
But it's still dissing Mother Earth, because the landfills that it's all going to and the crap we're putting in there is horrific. And we're going to be paying the price on that for many years to come.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's quite as bad as the nuclear, but it's pretty bad.
yeah.
And we're totally irresponsible with our trash.
I have a quick comment in response to that. Many years ago, in the late 70s, we spent a little time on a creek in southeast Utah, camping out, hanging out, and we would wander around and look for sites we thought would make a good campsite, and then we'd look around for remnants of the Anasazi. And we would maybe find chips from making arrowheads or broken pottery shards. And that was all that was left of the people who lived there. And I think of that as an example of how to leave a very light footprint.
Yeah, I've been there too. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll just say that it's really another basic thing is it's just important to take care of yourself and rejuvenate. And I'm somebody who likes to put my shoulder to the wheel and work hard and everything. And well, it's just it's really important to rest, and it's not all up to you. So the Jewish principle or tradition of tikkun olam, it's your responsibility to heal things, to do the right thing, but it's not your responsibility to do it alone. So I'm because of time, we're gonna skip the song, unfortunately, because I love that song. We are a gentle, angry people. But one of the other principles I follow is a deep commitment to nonviolence, which that song is really about.
It's not that way. Yeah.
Well, we have some more things to do. Sharon, just a little bit.
What's the will of you all? Shall we do the song and then go to the other, no, you could say no, that's not. Okay, so we'll pass on the song and
Do it another.
time. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I never stopped being an activist, so I'm going to end with some things that anyone can do to counteract the misplaced trust in nuclear power by the federal government and much of the mainstream media, if you are so moved. The first is to educate yourself so you feel comfortable talking about it. And on the screen, we'll have a couple of good resources. So these groups that I mentioned earlier.
Are they also out on the harvest table, these things?
No,
Oh, okay.
but we could do something about that.
Okay.
So if you hear someone saying that nuclear power is carbon-free or clean, tell them that's not true and why. The nuclear fuel cycle is a net carbon emitter. Yep. And that promoting nuclear power, even as a temporary bridge fuel to better sources of power, is the same thing as saying it's okay to keep extracting and refining uranium that sickens workers, poisons the water, and mostly in communities that are indigenous and majority Black or brown. That it's okay to allow nuclear power plants to emit radioactivity as a matter of standard operation. And it's okay to just keep accumulating waste that is toxic essentially forever and has no place to go. There is no place for this high level waste. So I often find that a lot of climate action groups talk about carbon-free, but they don't talk about nuclear-free. So I just make a point of adding it. I made this sign for a climate rally. And I just always add nuclear-free. So it makes a great conversation starter. They're like, I talk about the misalignment between nuclear power and climate action. Nuclear industry cannot survive without the subsidies and tax write-offs and bailouts from the federal government. It isn't even a good business model. So, and these new things we're hearing about small modular reactors, fusion, it's the same thing. They're sucking money away. They're stealing money away from cleaner sources of energy that we need right now, that exist right now. They just need to get bigger scale, be more affordable for people. Some of the money should also go to research, I think, and how to deal with pollution made by solar and wind. This is no source of energy is pollution free. How can we deal with the lithium and cobalt issues with batteries, for instance. And we also need to figure out a permanent repository for the high-level nuclear waste. Sitting on the banks of the Connecticut River in Brattleboro, there are 117 million curies of radioactivity, just feet from the Connecticut River. And if you looked, I think it was like a 20-year time span, I looked this up on the Department of Energy website. If you took all the medical and research radioactive materials that were used in like 20 years in Vermont, it was like 2 curies, just to give you a sense of how much radioactivity is in those casks that came out of Vermont. 117 billion curies. We need a place for it to go. It's just sitting there out in the open. And I want to leave you with this. Do not take anything that the industry or the government or the mainstream media says at face value. Nuclear is not green. It is not good for the planet. And it is filthy and dangerous. So my closing words today are my opening words. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear. And the stakes are very high. Take courage. For deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone. Thanks very much for having me here today. And I will be around for the coffee hour too. So.
Great, thank you.
So we have Chalice and Bell and
Yeah.
Joys and Sorrows.
Yeah. Did I give you seen the Marion is here. Right on the top right. You can see. I know. She saw you when you introduced me. Marion on the top right is a dear friend of ours. Yeah.